Doctors of Reddit, what is the strangest thing a patient said they had that actually turned out to be true? I'm an Obgyn resident. This one still freaks me out. As a med student, had a superbly kind and funny pregnant patient with mild hypertension, IVF twin pregnancies, conceived overseas, little older than usual, slightly overweight, previous C-section. Nothing really remarkable, just a few small risk factors altogether. She came to high-risk clinic and the fetal heart tracing was a bit too quiet. Not scary, just not great. Maternal fetal medicine subspecialist doctor said she should go for delivery. The lady and I were chatting. She was from the same city as my then girlfriend. She had a great sense of humor, took the delivery news like a champ. Jokingly said, "Okay, but don't let me die, I want to meet your girlfriend after all this." We said goodbye. The nurse and I smiled and wished her well. The attending then said, "I don't like this. This is the kind of patient that smiles, looks good, then dies." Nurse and medical student me both thought he was crazy. She had a textbook, uncomplicated C-section. Moved to recovery, 1 hour later suddenly lost her pulse with essentially no warning and died of an amniotic fluid embolism. Amniotic fluid embolism, unpredictable, unpreventable. Occurs in 1 out of every 20,000 to 50,000 births. I can still remember how she looked waving goodbye to us. I've seen a lot of people in a lot of different fields die, but this one still hurts my heart today. Obligatory, not a doctor, but a medical student. On my mental health placement there was a guy I saw on a home visit who was convinced his neighbor was trying to kill him. This guy had a history of mental health problems and the doctors were sure he was psychotic, and all of this was in his head. However, a few days later the doctor went round for another home visit and found his neighbor trying to climb through the window with an axe. The poor man wasn't psychotic at all, his neighbor was actually trying to murder him, and everyone thought he was just mad. Worked on the ambulances for a stint when I was fresh out of uni. One day I was transferring to another county with an elderly patient with such severe dementia he didn't remember his own wife, or even his name. The whole ride there, he was happily chatting away, telling me that he was an ex-international footballer, about his big victories and how he owned a business with David Beckham, mixed in with other psychedelic nonsense. I just kept asking him questions to keep him occupied and chatting, but in my head I was thinking it was just a funny side effect of his dementia. So we arrive at the new hospital and his lovely wife is waiting there. Me and my crewmate transferred him to his hospital bed and his wife shook our hands and thanked us profusely for being so kind with him. She said, "I know he's a bit of a handful, did he say much on the way?" And I said yes. He was telling us about being an international footballer and that he owned a business with David Beckham. She scoffs and says, "You told these nice people you were David's business partner? You only met him a couple of times." When I asked how he knew him, she explained that he had indeed been an international football player and was well known for heading the ball. In fact, the doctors thought that's why he developed the dementia. A patient walked in the clinic with a complaint of fever. I noticed his hands were very yellow. He did have a history of alcoholism but no other signs. I told him his hands suggest he is jaundiced and will need tests. He laughed and said, "Oh no, I just dusted my hands with turmeric." I had a bone replacement surgery, upper third of the tibia, and it was fixed in place to heal with a titanium plaque and screws. One day the plaque broke, and I went to the ER and told the doctor that I had a broken piece of titanium and he called it bullshit. His face after seeing the x-ray with the plaque separated in 2 pieces was priceless. Not a doctor, but a combat medic in the army. Had a private heat stroke on me and on his journeys back and forth between consciousness, he stated my butthole hurt ... but feel really good too in a slurred outburst. I looked at him, trying not to burst out laughing. Why yes, private, there's a rectal thermometer in your no-no square. My daughter had a fall on the trampoline when she was 3. She let out this really weird scream, then went pale, quiet and sweaty, and wouldn't let us touch her arm. We only live 5 minutes from the hospital, so I put her in the car and drove there. She slept in the car. We get to the hospital and check in, and she's found her second wind. The triage nurse rolled her eyes at me when I asked for an X-ray, but ordered one anyway. At this point my daughter was literally pirouetting around the waiting room. I was starting to doubt myself. Even the X-ray technician was laughing at us. About 5 minutes after the X-ray is taken, a very red-faced triage nurse runs out to the waiting room and firmly tells me to stop my daughter from dancing. She's broken her arm and they don't know if she will need surgery or not. She didn't need surgery in the end but spent 6 weeks in a plaster cast. It turns out she's badass and has a great pain threshold. Love her. Not a doctor, but a patient. In January this year, the side of my face grew bigger and bigger, and I was in extreme pain. I go to my GP and tell him looks like mumps, don't you think? But he brushes it off saying I got my vaccines. He sends me to the ER, because he does not know what I have and how to treat it. After 5 hours in the ER, they finally get my blood tested for the mumps. Turns out you can still have the mumps even though you're vaccinated. Not a doctor. Friend's son age 2 came home from daycare, said he had stuck an acorn up his nose. Mum looked, no acorn. Around 2.5 boy develops chronic throat and sinus infections, has 8 courses of antibiotics in a year. Age 4 boy is sent for tonsillectomy. Surgeon comes out to theater, shows mum a moldy rotten acorn. Turns out he did put an acorn up his nose. They left tonsils and boy ridiculously healthy ever since. My son did this with a jelly bean. After a $100 ER visit and a $10 ENT visit, it dissolved on its own. Luckily jelly beans are made of water-soluble sugar instead of insoluble acorn matter.
Make sure to like and subscribe for more stories.